Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 1 Million Cent podcast. My name is Ryan Fontenot, and as always, I want to remind you why we are here. We are here to equip, ignite, and inspire the next generation to not just know Jesus, but make Jesus known. So, whether you're a teen listening in, or you are a youth pastor, a volunteer, or a close your ears, teenagers, even a parent, we are so glad you are here and we are excited about today's episode. I have with me today one of my favorite leaders on the planet. And I'm not just saying that because he's in the room, or should I say, on the podcast. I'm excited because Roger has been an inspiration and an encouragement to me. And I guarantee you, untold thousands of other leaders throughout the years. So today, welcome with me to the podcast, Roger Davis, the president of YM360. Roger, how's it going today?
Hey, thanks. What a kind introduction. It's so good to be with you guys today, Ryan.
Man, I'm glad to have you here. Now, right now, you're in Birmingham, correct?
Yeah, Birmingham, Alabama today.
Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm just going to go ahead and get this out of the way. Roger Davis is a Tennessee Vols fan. Now, if you don't know what that picture is behind him, go ahead, Roger, show us.
Stretch it a little bit.
There it is.
Just a little bit there.
There it is. I'm not even going to lie. I went to the Tennessee Volunteers game last year when they're playing. It was Kentucky, right? They're playing Kentucky.
We destroyed Kentucky, by the way.
They destroyed Kentucky, kind of like what just happened in the national championship. But well, maybe not that bad, but it was a pretty much destruction. And it was my first experience at Neyland Stadium. It was mind blowing, man. And I sat as cheap of a seat as you could get, man. I got it. And, but I was in the house and it was awesome. So
that's a great example. Awesome. There's a bunch of people united for one thing, and kind of like what we're talking about today, when people get excited about something, passionate about something, you see it come out.
That's right. That's right. So you're going to love hearing from Roger. We're going to get a little bit of his story here in just a minute. But Roger, I always like to start out with these little rapid fire questions. Okay. All right. And it helps us just get going. So number one, are you a coffee guy or an energy drink guy?
You know what? This may surprise some people. I've never had coffee in my life. And so I've traveled all over the world to some of the best places producing coffee beans. I take them for people, but I've never had coffee in my life. And I've never had an energy drink, like the traditional energy drink. I've had stuff that might classify as an energy drink. So I'm neither. I'm probably way too many Coke Zeros. So that would be my energy drink, or just good old-fashioned water.
I like that. And that's why Roger is able to do probably what he does. He told me that last summer he's never drank coffee. And I was like, oh my goodness, I think you're the first human over 18 that I've ever met that hasn't drank coffee.
Well, there's a few times where I'm like, do I start now? Like,
No, don't do it, man. No. So realizing you're a Coke Zero guy, that does beg the question then, would you consider yourself a morning, a midday, or a night person?
Well, I'll tell you this, for the longest time, I've been a night person, but as I've aged, as I get a little older, nights seem to get a little bit younger. I was the guy that I'd crank out work from like 10, 11, 12 when my kids were younger, going to sleep. But now they're starting to be like, okay, dad's going to bed. So I'd probably say midday. Midday's a good time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. That's good. Well, I know you travel a ton. I travel full time, but listen, I don't think anybody's travel schedule compares to Roger Davis's. So when you travel, now I got to know, is your preference to fly or to drive?
My rule of thumb is a 6-hour radius. A drive is always better.
Okay.
Get there, you can control your schedule. Beyond 6 hours, I probably prefer to fly because I can actually work. I can get stuff done. I used to always say this, put me on an airplane to Portland and let me fly there and fly back. I'd get more work done in a day than sometimes being at the office.
Oh,
a lot of youth pastors can relate to that.
There's a lot of truth right there in that. So that's awesome. Well, when you do travel outside of like camps and ministry, would you say you're more of a beach guy or a mountain guy, or is there another terrain that you prefer?
If you look at my skin and my complexion, I'll tell you this, Ryan: sun, sand, salt, especially all over my body. Give me the mountains. I enjoy going to
Oh,
the beach and looking
yes,
at it. You know,
that's right.
it's very
Yeah,
calming.
yeah,
I was this past November. I was at the beach for 10 days. I never went to the
yeah.
beach, but I took in the ocean air, and I
It was
loved it.
there. You
Yeah, I
you
was
were
there.
near
The
it.
sun
You
was
were
great,
near
but I
it.
was there cranking
There
out
you
work.
go. That's awesome. So now, when it comes to seasons, these are crazy questions, I know,
Yeah.
but
Okay, come on.
you prefer like winter, spring, summer, fall? Like, is there a season you prefer?
That's one great thing about living in Birmingham. We actually have 4 seasons. You know, if you're Florida, it's like tourist season, non-tourist season. You know,
That's
but for
right.
us, we have 4 real seasons here. Summer obviously is the go-to answer because of the
Yeah,
fact that it's prime time for us to do the ministry and the calling that God's called us to. But
yeah,
there's just something special about the fall. I mean, the
yeah,
leaves changing, and we're right here in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, and so we get cooler temperatures at night, leaves changing.
yeah.
And what do you have? You have football. You have an
Oh,
opportunity to spend
there
a
it
good time
is.
with family. So it's yeah, I'm gonna say the fall, but ministries go time. It's special
There you
time.
go. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Summer is the time for, man, camps and just things like that. And we'll get into what you guys do at Generate and YM360 with that. But
Okay.
then the fall, man, it's hard. It's hard to beat the fall as far as weather. Even in Texas, we do get a couple of weeks of fall where we are.
Yeah.
So nothing like where you are. So one more kind of
Okay.
random question. Wh- when it comes to dessert, are you more of a cake guy or is it pie for you? What would you prefer?
Well, my kids would probably say ice cream, especially Bluebell.
Hey, there
Yeah.
you
So,
go.
but cake probably. Although those little
Okay.
gas station pies, I'm talking about like the apple pie at gas stations.
Yes,
Th-
yes.
those can be pretty addictive.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we learned all those little tricks on the road, don't we?
Oh
We're
yeah.
like, "Hey, that's a good dessert right there.
Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome."
hard to
Well,
be healthy on the road.
yeah. Well, let's go a little bit more spiritual.
Okay.
When it comes to the Bible, would you say you are more of an Old Testament guy or New Testament?
You know what? I actually really struggle with this concept.
God,
Especially working with teenagers. I work with 12th grade guys. And when we think about the word old, what do we immediately
mm,
think of? Old, outdated,
oh,
no longer has value.
yeah,
New,
yes,
we grab a hold of that. Obviously, I think we spend a lot of time in the New Testament. But Ryan, I think
hmm
we have to understand we've built on the foundation of the Old Testament. So what I do, I actually, with my guys, I call it the First
hmm
Testament and the Second Testament.
All right, I
Because what
like
I
it.
want to do is I want to understand we're building on who we are. Like this is the
Yeah,
foundation of who we are. So I don't know. I mean, obviously it's hard to not really look at the Gospels and focus on Jesus. Acts is an amazing
right.
book. Romans, fantastic.
Yeah,
But we just finished a
nice.
study in Daniel, 12
Oh.
chapters in Daniel with my adult group, and man, it was powerful.
There's a lot to learn there, yeah, for sure. I appreciate that. I ask that question because I love to just watch guy go. Most everybody goes, well, both, and I know. So if they're a preacher, I always ask them, well, where are most of your sermons out of?
There
That's
you go.
so
Yeah,
because I have some Old Testament friends, man. They can bring some light. I love it when the Old Testament is preached just rightly and
yeah.
man, there's so much there.
And
So,
I tell my
but
guys all the time, like Hebrews is in the New Testament. Obviously, we know it's one of the New
yeah,
Testament books, but it's kind of like
yeah,
an Old Testament book in the New Testament.
yeah. I would
So I'm like,
agree.
yeah, if
Yeah.
you want to really have an introductory to Old Testament, start in Hebrews.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Well, speaking of the New Testament, the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, I think they're all a little bit different. I like the way
Yeah.
each of them write a little bit different. If you out of the four, which is kind of your lean in? I like the way this guy did it.
Well, obviously, 4 writers, same story, 4 different perspectives. Uh, the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke,
Yeah.
they tell it one way, but I always look at it like
Mhm.
this. It's like, that kid who had the 64 Crayola box with the the little Crayola sharpener?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That's right.
we show up for like
Yeah.
eight
Yeah.
crayons, 16 crayons.
That's right.
John is kind of like the writer with 64 crayons.
I like that. I
He
like
is
that.
writing and telling a story, and we obviously know that in John 20:31 when he tells us,
Hmm.
why did he write these things? So that you would believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. The guy that I teach with, my 12th grade guys, his license plate is John 20:31. So
Wow.
I'm a real fan of John 20. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
not John 20, John, and just kind of
Yeah.
how he writes and goes about it, and just tells the stories. And if you have a new believer, obviously the book of John, fantastic place to start.
And that's why you listen to this podcast. I'm telling you, Roger Davis is going to drop wisdom that I don't even know or expect yet because this guy, I think Roger might be one of the most well read men that I know. And I don't even know how much he's read, but every time
Yeah,
I
I
talk to
don't
him,
know about that, my man.
oh, right. Yeah. No, don't even go there. So I do have one last question, but I don't want
Yeah.
you to answer it right now. We'll swing back to it at the very end.
Okay.
It is because I know it's just burning on people's minds to know, is Roger Davis a dog guy or a cat guy? Don't answer that right now. We'll come back to it at the end, and we'll seal it up and got it going on there. So
Strong
Roger,
opinions
tell
about it. I
us.
look forward to answering that one for you.
I can't. I can't. This. I'm telling you guys. Do not. As a matter of fact, if you have the ability right now to comment something, why don't you comment wherever you're watching or listening? Hey, do you think Roger is a dog guy or a cat guy? We'll find out here in a little bit. But Roger, let's jump into a little bit
Yeah.
about you, man. I know you are the president of YM360. Some people know exactly what that is. Some people have no idea what that is. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I would say this, Ryan. One of my personal goals in life, and I think my calling is I want to help people, primarily students, get the gospel and then give it away. So when I
That's
think
good.
about what I do, I think naturally when someone asks you that question in an elevator, in a conversation, on an airplane, at a gas station, getting little apple pies, wherever we may be, people ask us, well, what do we do? And we immediately go to the task that we perform every day.
That's good.
The
Yeah.
identify, I work at an oil, company. I do this, I'm a
Yeah.
student or whatever, but for me, when I think about what I do, I want to help teenagers, help adults, help people get the gospel and then give it away. And
I
those
love
are the
it.
realities. How do I do that is the question.
Yes.
And so I do
Yes.
that primarily through my day-to-day operations, my day-to-day world. Um, at YM360, I look at my life, Ryan. The top of my table is gospel advancement. I have multiple legs
Mm.
on the bottom of my table, holding up the top of the table. One of those is YM360 with what we do, creating resources and experiences. One of those is
Yeah.
Servant Life. I still serve as the executive director with Servant Life, which is about mobilizing people around the world and again, primarily students to share the gospel. Through my relationship with Fund the Nations and what we do there, I'm trying to help mobilize and adopt. And a lot of that is gospel driven and just kind of what we do
Yes.
at my local church. I think it's important for me to be involved in my local church. I teach an
Hmm.
adult small group, a student small group there. So at the end of the day, what do? I try to leverage my life, my skills, my abilities to help people get the gospel and give it away.
That's oh man, I love it. And I'm telling you, if you've been struggling with how do you define what you do, I think you would take what Roger just said and really apply that to your own life. And I love it. Help students get the gospel and give the gospel to advance the kingdom, advance the gospel wherever we are, whatever we're doing.
Yeah.
And so, but you're right, man. A lot of times we're like, oh well, I'm a lawyer or I'm a cop or I'm a teacher. Okay, awesome. Yeah, but yeah, that's how you do what you do. So I
Yeah.
love that
You know what? Like for
perspective
us with
there.
our summer staff, Ryan, every single person on staff, the number one thing on their job description is be a minister. And
Wow,
then,
that's
I'm an
right.
audio engineer. I work with
Yeah.
R.A.G.E. I work with, administrative stuff.
Hmm.
But number one job description is be a minister. And if you're a lawyer, if you're a teacher, whatever, we have to understand number one job description is be a minister, be a gospel advancer.
That's it, man. That's 100% it. And having worked with you guys at camps, I can say every one of those summer staffers do that so well. Well, tell me how, because watching this, we're going to have people who are in the ministry, whether they're
Yeah.
senior pastors, youth pastors, whether they are lay leaders. We're going to have parents watching this, adults who have a career already, but we also have a lot of teens that'll be watching this and they're trying to figure out maybe something you're saying, maybe something you do. They're going to be like, "Man, I want to do that." How did Roger? How did you get to be president at YM360? Can you give us a snapshot of your journey from your call into ministry, whatever,
Yeah.
to where you are today?
Well, first of all, there's probably still a lot of people wondering when I'm going to get a real job. Can you relate, Ryan? You know,
every day, every
every day
day.
people ask that question. Or
Yes.
people will say this to me. They'll say, well, don't you want a normal life? And I'm like, this is
No,
normal. I've been doing this for
that's
30 years. Do you go to a lawyer,
that's
like you mentioned? Do you go to
that's
a
right.
surgeon? Do
Yeah,
you go to a basketball player?
yeah,
Do you want
yeah.
to, this is normal for me.
This is
Now,
normal.
how
Yeah.
did I get here was the question. Obviously,
Hmm.
when I looked at the path that I began and kind of just where I am now, I didn't think this is necessarily where I would be. When I was 17 years old, God clearly called me into ministry. That's something that kind of was a relic for maybe the last 10, 20 years. It feels like we're having more discussions about call to
Yeah,
ministry, which is beautiful. But
yeah.
but I know without a doubt in 1991, when I was 17 years old, God called me to ministry.
Mhm.
Now I thought at the time that meant student ministry. And my mom was so excited. She started buying me suits and all the stuff I've never worn. Like I still have suits probably with tags on them somewhere in the closet. Um, but my very first year of college, I'd done camp before. I grew up in Boy Scouts and different things like that. And I'd done camp. I'd worked on camp staff with scouts and things like that. But my very first year in college, I worked a Christian summer camp called Crosspoint. And it radically changed my life, just simply because for the first time I began to see, oh, ministry is not just something in the local church. Now, one thing I want to say that is ministry should always be in the local church. But what we were doing with camp is supporting that.
That's
And for
right.
the first time, I began to see that 1 week of camp ministry could really impact the other 51 weeks of life. And so I did that through my college years, worked as a student minister in a church, and then had another opportunity to continue to do camps and served for 19 years leading an organization called Student Life. They're still doing unbelievable ministry and opportunities that are out there. So I was there for 19 years. And then about 8 years ago or so now, I joined up with YM360. Ironically, the guy that started YM360, two guys started YM360, but the guy that started YM360, when he was a fourth grader, I was a Bible study leader for him.
Wow.
His
Fourth
wife,
grade.
what's
Wow.
that?
I said fourth grade. You were
Fourth
his
grade.
leader.
Yeah, he was
That's
fourth grade, and
amazing.
I was a leader
That's
for him
awesome.
at that particular time. And his wife was actually in my wife's student ministry. My wife was a student minister for many years.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so, we were
Love
just
it.
trying to be faithful to the next step in front of us. I oftentimes say in life and backpacking, whatever you do, one step at a time is good walking. So what I want to do is
Yes.
just be faithful with whatever that next step
Mm,
is. And the Lord just
mm,
begins to reveal some things. So I didn't plot out a path. It was like, hey, I'm going
right.
to do this.
Yeah.
But
That's
over
good.
the years, I've just continued to do it and continue to do it. And I'm old enough now where I don't think I'm going to do anything else. We had a real moment 8 years ago when we left student life, when we said,
Mhm.
okay, Lord, what do you want from us? We weren't really
Yeah.
sure. And then over the course of that departure and just some change and stuff, the Lord just told us, let's leverage our life for things that matter. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to leverage our life for the next generation, for teenagers,
Mm,
specifically college students, and just
yeah.
let them do what? Get the gospel and give it away. I want to teach them. I want to help them be not just consumers of the gospel, but conduits. The difference
Yeah.
is
That's it.
consumers, it's about me. Conduits, it flows through me to somebody else. And I think that's what we want to be about as parents. That's what we want to be about as leaders.
Oh, it's so good. Man, and again, I hope you hear Roger's heart and see the genuine passion that he has there. Think about this: 8 years ago, he and his wife and his family had an opportunity to say, "Hey, you know what? Is this time to do something different?" As God, and then to come to that conclusion, "Hey, we want to leverage our lives for something that impacts eternity." Is just, man. If I think no matter where you are, no matter what you quote unquote want to do with your life,
Yeah.
if that's the heartbeat behind it, man, that's the Lord. That's when you know that's what God has really called you to.
Yeah. And
And
I
so
tell my
you're
guys that all the time, Ryan. Like, again, I have 12th grade guys, and I'm like, I've got one guy who's going to go to West Point. That's
yeah.
awesome. Like, be a
Yes.
believer at West Point.
Yes.
I got another guy who is a phenomenal runner. And, this morning he's at Waffle House, in a small group, learning the word. And so
Mm,
one of the things I want him
love
to
it.
do is I want him to go and I want him to run. And
Yeah.
he wants to go into cybersecurity. And I'm like, go into cybersecurity and like be a
Yeah.
believer
Yeah.
who is in cybersecurity, regardless of what you do. If you're a young person watching this, regardless of what you do, understand this. That's who you are first. And then your identity is not just I'm a lawyer, I'm in
That's right.
cybersecurity, I'm a runner. Those are great things, but you are a Christ follower and you
Yeah.
were put in a position for a reason.
Ah, man, that's so good. That's gold, guys. I hope you're taking a little bit of notes here, maybe even writing some stuff down or bookmarking this thing to share with other people. Because I guarantee you, when Roger was saying those things, if it wasn't resonating in your heart, here's what happens for me a lot of time, Roger. I'm like, oh man, I need to share that with someone else. And so, man, let me encourage you to do that. Share this with someone else if you are getting value and you are saying, man, amen to what's happening here. Make sure you share it because you never know what a little share with someone else. I can't tell you how many people have sent me a podcast episode. They're like, hey, I was listening to this and the Lord just put you on my heart. And I was like, man, I needed that. So thanks for sharing those things. And when it comes to the next generation, obviously there's a passion you've leveraged over 3 decades now, obviously, of your life. You have kids at home. Tell it you have 3 kiddos. Tell
I
us
have four. I have four
four.
kids, and they're
Yeah,
all in student ministry. I have 3 daughters, and my son
that's
about to
right.
go to college. but we're the
Wow.
Pack-a-Pew family. Like we have all 4 kids in student ministry right now, and
they
so
sh- when they show up, and the cool thing is, this past summer at Generate, I got to serve with every one of them, and man, it was they it it's one thing people always. I think ministry kids get a bad rap, and I can just tell you, watching Roger, watching Becca's wife, watching the kids just serve the Lord, serve the church is, man, what a blessing. So
well, and let
I
me say this about this, Ryan, too. If you're a pastor or you're somebody that has kids, one of the things that's real important to us, we call it family on mission.
yes.
It's really important for our kids to understand this is not what dad does. This is not what mom and dad. This is what we do.
Mm,
God's called all of us to this, and
yeah.
that's a part of their journey and a part of their testimony and a part of their mission. And so,
Yeah.
the more you can have your kids, and I know you may say, well, they don't get a paycheck. They don't do this stuff like that. Remember this: ministry is not a paycheck. Let's just go ahead and say
No.
that. A
Yeah.
paycheck
Yeah.
is a provision, but ministry is
Yeah.
not a paycheck. And
Mm,
so, the
that's
more we
good.
can live life on mission with our family, it's just a beautiful thing.
And it is. And I'll tell you, just a little bit of time I got to spend with Roger and his family. Just some wisdom he dropped on me, and having walked with his. My kids are a little bit behind where his are, but man, it's just going, man. That's the way, man, to view your family, to view what you do, and to get your family involved. But this passion for the next generation. Why is that? Why are you so passionate? If you could give me maybe one or two, hear some whys. Why are you so passionate about the next generation? Why not go do something else with a different age group somewhere else or whatever? Why camps? You've poured over 3 decades of your
Yeah.
life into the next generation.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this question. I was actually at a camp this past summer. We had maybe 20, 22 youth pastors in a room. And I asked this question, Ryan. I said, let me ask you a question. How many of you became a believer before you were 12? And there were a handful of hands that went up. And I said, okay, now how many of you became a believer before you were 18? And all but one hand was raised. So in a room of 20, 22 people, all but
Wow,
one hand was raised. And I just wanted to remind those guys and gals, what you do matters.
that's good.
Like at the end of the day, you're not a minister of games, you're not a minister of
Mm.
pizza, you're not a minister of gossip, trying to deal with young people. You're a minister of the gospel. And when
Yes.
we think about that, if life change, and I'm talking about eternal life change, if that happens primarily when kids are children or teenagers, why would we not be passionate about that?
Mm.
Why would we
Yeah.
not want to leverage our lives for those types of things? Because man, they really matter. And I talk to a lot of people, and they're like, "Well, I'm getting too old to be a youth pastor." I love what I call button-down youth pastors,
Uh-huh.
guys and gals, that are like, I'm not trying to wear the hippest t-shirt. I'm not
Mhm.
trying to like frost my hair.
Right.
I'm not
Right.
trying to feel like I have to do everything that teenagers need spiritual mothers and fathers, not big brothers and big sisters.
That's good. That's good.
And so when we can be that, and when we can leverage our life, the word we've been using a few times, when we can leverage our life for things that matter, and we look at,
Mhm.
well, wow, if kids are becoming believers when they're 15 and 13 and 12, why would we not really leverage our gifts, talents, and abilities towards that generation?
Yes. Let me just give that, man. I don't care if you're preaching to the choir, but I'm like, man, I agree, and I hope that others here are hearing that, because I think statistics, and they're take them for what they are, but
Yeah.
stats say exactly what you just said. Over 70+% of anyone who ever comes to Jesus does so by their 18th birthday,
Yeah.
and I say it like this, Roger. If we don't get them before they turn the tassel, the likelihood that we ever get them drastically reduces.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
you see that as well.
And I'll tell you about this too. You throw the rock in the pond and you see the ripple. If we
Mhm.
don't get them before they turn the tassel, imagine this: if we don't get a young man, women especially, girls especially, but the likelihood, like statistically,
Mhm.
if a mother is a believer, it's like in the 25% that their family is going to be believers. But if the
Wow.
father is a believer, it's like in the 82, 83%. So when you
Wow.
think about that, if we can even get the heart of a young man who becomes
Yeah.
a passionate believer,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden now they're following and pursuing the Lord, well, they're going to lead their
Mm.
family in a way. We want a
Golly.
woman to do that as well. We want them
Mm.
to both lead their family, but
Yeah.
the dilemma is we just have a task in front of us. And the biggest reason why youth pastors, I think, they leave student ministry It's not because they don't love teenagers. It's because of finances, because we don't invest
That's
enough
exactly right.
in our youth pastors. We don't invest enough in
100%.
children's ministers. Same thing with teachers in the public school system, private school system. People are like, I love being an educator, but I need to go somewhere else because
Yeah.
I have financial needs.
You have to
And so
provide
our
for my.
churches really need to pay attention to that.
That's a good just every senior pastor listening to this, every layperson in church who gives or serves on a
Yeah.
board, you need to hear that, because this what Roger just said is absolutely, without a doubt, true. Because you think you hire them when they're in college or seminary, they're single, they don't have a family, then they get married, then they
Yeah.
start having kids, and you're paying them the same thing. No wonder they have to go get another job, or they have to
Absolutely.
work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And
man,
like Whitney Houston said, the children are our future, so let's teach them well. So like let's follow the lead from old Whitney here and make sure that we are
ah,
raising up a generation and we're investing our resources in things that matter.
that's a first, Roger. I don't think Whitney's ever come up on a podcast yet,
I
man.
bet
That's a
you will be.
first. I love it. I love it. Well, you said that one of your goals is to help students not just get the gospel, but give the gospel. So I have a
Yeah.
question, because this podcast is really leveraged in how can we equip, how can we help. In your dealings, in your talkings, your questioning of students and student pastors, when it comes to maybe why they are not giving the gospel, what are
Yeah.
some of the reasons you found to be true as to why students and adults maybe not be giving the gospel away?
Well, I mean, we may not like talking about this as much, but you can't give away what you don't have.
Mm,
And
mm,
so one of the things, like with Servant Life, I mentioned Servant Life. We have like 25
yeah.
places around the world and a lot of international
Hmm.
partners. We get passionate young people that want to go on a short-term mission trip, and they go there. And I talk to our partners around the world, and here's what they say: great kids, great group, phenomenal energy. Unfortunately, they just don't know the gospel. They don't know how to share the gospel.
Mm, yeah.
And so one
Yeah.
of the realities in our church, we have to teach our young people how to share the gospel. Like we have to teach them how to
Yes.
know the gospel, yes, and then how to share the gospel, because that's what comes out of us. I
Right.
oftentimes, Ryan, talk about a 33-30 method. And
Okay.
what I believe and what I want is, I want our guys, I want my kids, I want other people that work on our staff. I want them to be able to think about it like this, with a 33-30 method. Can you
Okay.
share the gospel story in 30 seconds? Like if
Okay.
you have a conversation with somebody in a subway, talking to somebody on a street, whatever,
Yeah.
can you share the gospel in 30 seconds? Can you share the gospel in 3 minutes? Like, you get a little
Mm,
bit more time to expand on that. Or could you sit down over coffee and share the gospel in 30 minutes?
yeah. That's good.
And so you
Yeah.
think about a 33-30 method. We as
Yeah.
believers, if we have been equipped to share the gospel and we're ready for that stuff, that's great. And it's the same
That's
thing.
good.
The gospel, a lot of times when you ask somebody, well, tell me, about the gospel, or tell me your story, those sometimes things, it's like, I can tell you maybe about the gospel, or I can tell you a little bit
Right.
about your story, but those don't make sense. I was up at the IMB, International Mission Board, Baptist,
Hmm.
crowd will know that, but International Mission Board up in Virginia, a handful of years ago with some friends up there. The International Mission Board had a period. I don't know if they're still doing this, but they had a period where they have an 8-week training program where
Hmm.
they're training for families to go overseas, right? They had to add a ninth week, Ryan, because many families who were going long-term missions were showing up and they didn't know how to share the gospel.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so they
Yeah.
added a ninth week that was just all about, let me train
That's so
you
good.
to share
Yeah.
the gospel. And that's a responsibility of our churches. That's not a
Yeah.
responsibility of an organization, the IMB.
Right.
It's not the responsibility, but as churches, we should
Hmm.
be training our young people. We should be
Yeah.
training our people. And again, this is where I'm saying, not just be consumers. What happens? You show up
Yeah.
on Sunday morning, you show up on Wednesday night, you're consuming the
Hmm.
gospel. But the
Right.
question is, are you a conduit? The question is that gospel that's been consumed now able to go out of you, and are you equipped to be able to share that? You talk to me about my best,
Yeah.
my favorite football teams.
Yeah.
I can rattle that off. We make
That's
disciples
right.
every day. Most likely, whatever your teams are, Ryan, that's your kids' teams too,
Yeah.
because you make
Yeah.
disciples about them. You talk to my son who's 18 years old, and he can rattle off all sorts of things about the teams we like. The question is, can
Yeah.
my 18-year-old son also rattle off the things about what make Jesus attractive and special, what makes grace amazing, what makes the
Mm,
gospel real? Can we
mm,
do that? Going back to the book of John, can we point to things like that where we say, hey, this is life. This is
yeah.
what it means. Do we understand Romans? It doesn't matter if it's 3 circles, the Romans row, different colors, creating a cliff. But the question is,
Right.
in the moment, will you be prepared to share the gospel? And so I
Yeah.
think one of the big reasons why we're not doing it is we're not equipped and we're not confident.
That's good, man. I 100%, man, just agree with that. And along those lines, let me ask you this as kind of a follow up: is there so people are watching this and they're going, yeah, I know, or they're listening and they're going, ah, man, he's right. So I want this to be real practical. Is there a good next step for someone who's saying, you know what, Roger, you're right. I don't know that I can articulate the gospel. And what is maybe one either method or one resource, maybe YM360 or someone else, it doesn't matter to me, who you're like, hey, this is a real good resource for you to figure out how to articulate the gospel.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys have show notes or whatever, but you could
Yeah.
maybe put some even examples in the show notes.
Hmm.
Ryan, you've done the bracelet before where it's got some
Hmm.
different simple symbols. I
Yeah. This
mentioned,
one.
yeah, you weren't it right there. I
That's
mentioned
right.
three circles. You can Google three
Yep.
circles, and it's super easy. The
Yep.
Roman road. That's not
Hmm.
someplace over in Italy. The Roman road and being able to walk
Yeah.
somebody through Romans 3:23,
Right.
Romans 6:23, Romans 5:8. You know, I do five fingers sometimes, and I've got each of these different five fingers. See, I could all of a sudden be talking to somebody, and they could say, they're wearing a Yankees hat, they're wearing an Astros hat, whatever. Congratulations, Astros. You finally won without a trash can. But anyways, whatever they're wearing, and I can see, okay,
Yeah.
you're a baseball fan. Do you like baseball? And they're like, yeah. And I'll be like, okay, I can use baseball now to share the gospel. And so,
Yeah.
for instance, I can talk about, okay, let's establish first base. There's a God. He created all
Yeah.
things. Let's talk about that. If we establish first base here, there's a God. But now we have a problem. Second base, we have a problem. There's sin. And
Mm.
sin has come into the world. This is how sin came into the world. But praise God, we have a solution, a provision,
Yeah.
third base, Jesus. And guess what? He gets us home. And
Yes.
so I can
Good.
talk to somebody because they're wearing a baseball hat. Because if I know the gospel, I can adapt it to the environment.
That's right.
And so I think the biggest deal, and one of the things I would tell young people is get your Bible out. In the back of the Bible, that
Hmm.
God was so kind because he put a bunch of blank pages in the back of the Bible, and so did, Zondervan and Lifeway and everybody else that
That's
uses
right.
Bibles.
Yeah.
But go to those back pages and write down in those back pages literally different ways to share the gospel. Two or
Hmm.
three, four different ways. You're going to find the one you're most comfortable with. And then the
Yes.
question is, the more comfort you become with it, it's like a pitcher. A pitcher has four or five pitches, but they have
Hmm.
their go-to pitch, and
Yes.
you are going to be able to develop a way for you to have the gospel and be able to say, okay, this is going to be my go-to gospel presentation depending upon the environment. And so I think one of the
Mm.
biggest deals, going back to your original question, people just don't feel comfortable in what they don't know. I can
Yeah.
talk all day about things I know,
Yeah.
but the more we become familiar with the gospel, the more we understand the gospel. And I would
Mm.
say this, even if you have to, share the gospel with the mirror in your bathroom.
Yeah.
Share the gospel with,
Yeah.
somebody like that. Record
Yeah.
yourself sharing the gospel. Do tandem stuff
Mm.
with a friend. Hey, can I share the gospel? If you have a dog, hint. If you have a dog, right there, share the gospel with your dog.
Yes. Yeah,
You
if you have a
know,
cat, definitely share the gospel with a cat.
we'll talk about that.
Oh man, I love it. I love what you're saying there, Roger. Man, I don't know if you know this, but I just finished a book, and it's at one of the phases. It's but done editing anyway,
It's out of your hands.
and
Yeah, that's good.
it's out of my hands. And the exciting thing for me about that is everything that you just said there is part of these practical steps that I talk about in that book. And it is. And I would say this, anyone listening, hey, if you're trying to figure out a good next step, I would say go to 1millioncent.com,
Yep.
1millioncent.com. There's free resources there. It's a way. It's not the way. It's a way. Learn a way. And like Roger said, get familiar with the outline of the gospel, and you're going to find different ways. I always say this, Roger, when you know the gospel, it never feels like a gospel presentation, but you can always have gospel conversations,
Yeah.
right? And that,
Yeah.
like you just said, with the baseball thing, that nobody would think, oh, well, that's just some canned illustration.
Yeah.
No. It's just a conversation.
Well,
So,
and that's the beautiful thing about it too, Ryan. We're not responsible for the outcome. We're
no,
just
man,
responsible for the
no,
conversation. Like, we just
that's
have the
it.
conversation and we leave the outcome to the Lord. But
That's
you
it.
know, if
Yeah.
we want to make cookies, there's a recipe. If you want to make
Yes.
guacamole, there's a recipe. You don't just try to figure something out. And if we want to make disciples, there's a recipe.
I
It's
love it.
called the
Yeah.
gospel.
There you go. I love it. I love it. Well, the whole goal of this podcast is to bring some inspiration to people too. And I know in your years of ministry, you've had stories and you have stories of students who both get it and then they have the opportunity to give it. And I was wondering if you have a story that may pop up to mind of a student who, man, they got it and they started living on mission, leveraging their life to advance the gospel. And is there someone who just comes to mind when I say that, that you could just share with us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, and you're talking like a teenager that obviously goes
See,
and
yeah, just someone you've seen, like,
yeah,
it clicks and you're like, "Hey, this I remember this teenager." Maybe your own kid, I don't know,
yeah,
but you're
yeah,
like, "Hey, I remember," in the stories, because you guys do a great job of capturing stories of students and everything
yeah.
like that, but a student who just meant they got the gospel and then they started giving it away.
Yeah, like you said, that's one of the things we love doing, just telling people stories and stuff like that.
Mhm.
First of all, let me just mention this, and let's be reminded, especially if you're a young person watching this. Mary was a teenager, like
Mm,
the mother of Jesus was a teenager.
yeah,
Most likely
yeah,
John, maybe some of the other disciples were teenagers. They
yeah,
would say that usually you start following a rabbi between 12 and 30. And so
right.
there's a good chance that some of these guys were teenagers that left everything. Talk about an amazing story. They literally left their profession, they left whatever they did, and they started
Mm,
following Jesus.
yes.
I'm thinking specifically right now about a young man who he actually started. It was with I saw him at camp. He was with us, and he started sponsoring a compassion kid because he was
Uh-huh.
just like, wow, I want to do something. And he was young, like 12 years old. And then I got to see him over the course of a few years, and he went from that to then saying, I want to go, and I want to go on a mission trip. And so he went from there to a mission trip. And then, before we know it, I see him as a 17-year-old, and guess what he's doing? He's saying, I feel like God's calling me into ministry. But
Yeah,
because what he does, he softened his heart to these
that's right.
types of things, and he started, doing stuff. But here's the crazy thing about it. I talked to this guy's youth pastor, and as I talked to this kid's youth pastor, one of the things he said is, he said, yeah, he went on a mission trip, but he's doing this in his school. Like, he is sharing the
Yes,
gospel, and
that's
he's
it.
living. And a lot of times we think, oh, okay, I'm going to go on a mission trip, and now I'm going to share the gospel, and now I'm going to be a
Right.
missionary. Well, that's awesome. But guess what? God calls us to be a missionary wherever we are.
That's right.
And so you don't have to go
Yes.
over an ocean in order to share the gospel. And so
Yes.
this young man who at the time, I saw him as he was kind of going into college, and he was trying to figure out things
Yeah.
like go to Bible college or seminary. And, even then he's thinking, okay, I need to have the next 7, 8 years planned out. I said, just be faithful in the next step, just like
Yep.
you were when you're 12. Be
That's it.
faithful in that next step to say, Lord, what do you want from me? And so I think a good thing to do is like literally just sit there before the Lord. I'm not talking about like yoga or any Eastern
Mm.
mysticism or anything like that, but just put your hands out and say, Lord,
Yeah,
what do you want from me?
that's good.
Like this year. Let's not think about next year, like this year, this
Yeah.
semester, this week, this month. What do you want from me?
Mm.
And kind of like, what do we see in that Old Testament, the First Testament? What do we see? Here am I, send me.
Yep.
Just
Yeah.
having that mindset to say, whatever you want from me, here am I, send me, and I'm ready to do that. I had a pastor friend,
Mhm.
he would always talk about the blank check, just literally having that blank check. And so I go back to this young man and what I saw over his life as he kind of grew up. And what I see as I look to the disciples, obviously it was
Mhm.
Jesus that called them. But guess what? That same Jesus calls us.
That's right.
They just
Yes.
simply said, you know what? Whatever you want, I'm
Mm.
willing to go. I'm willing to give.
That's it. I love it. I love the fact that it started out for this young man, where with his treasure, supporting the compassion child, right? And it reminded me as soon as you said that, hey, where your treasure is, there your heart will be
Yeah.
also. And I'm like, so students may be thinking, well, I can't go, I can't, I'm busy, whatever. But you can give, you can pray, you can go, because I believe when you give and pray, you're going to go,
Yeah,
and it
absolutely.
always
Yeah.
happens. So,
Yeah.
oh
Grab on
man,
to James 1:22. Grab on to
yes.
James 1:22. Don't just be
Yeah,
what? Hearers of the
hears
word,
of the
or
word.
be doers of the word, not just hearers of the
Yeah,
word.
yes, that's
And,
right.
and
Yeah.
and I think we need a generation of that. They show up and they listen to the Ryan Fontenot or fill in the blank. They show up and listen to their youth pastor. They show up and listen to their Sunday school
Mhm.
teacher. But the question is, do we take it from hearing to now become
Mm.
doing? And
Yes,
again, as I sit there and I do that, I'm like, God, take my head, take my heart, take my hands, because
mm,
I really want to be a doer of the word.
that's right, that's right, and I know in so many ways, Roger, your family is on mission, and the organization you work with, YM360. So as we wrap up here, guys, I want you to know if you're looking for ministry resources, and Roger, I want you to please do a way better pitch than I can on this. But if you're looking for resources, you're looking for camps, you're looking for a way to get equipped in any realm of ministry, YM360 puts out incredible
Yeah.
resources. They produce amazing camps. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a part of it. I've been a fan long before I was ever a part of it. So, Roger, tell everybody a little bit about YM360 and then how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. Real simple. We love helping people and we love helping churches. We exist because the church needs resources. The church needs to be resourced. Obviously, the best resource we have is the Word of God, 66 books pointed in one direction. But what we do is we do Bible studies, we do devotions, sermon series, all sorts of stuff. You can check those out at ym360.com. We do live events as well over the course of the summer. I just really do. I believe that that 1 week can radically change a
Yeah.
life. In 1987, my life was changed at a camp forever. And so you can check out generatestudents.com. I'd love to connect with you if you want. Roger at ym360.com. You can find my information there, my cell phone, whatever, and would love to. At J Roger, no, it's at J Roger Davis is pretty much everything on social media. My kids think it's really weird. Like they're like, Dad, you have a Be Real? I don't do Be Real. I don't do that, but I don't want anybody else to have my name. So I always
That's
grab
right.
those. So it's
Grab
always
it.
at J
There you
Roger
go.
Davis.
There you go.
You
You
won't
have
find
you
me
have
on TikTok, but my name is secure.
Oh, you're going to be on TikTok because we're going to clip some of this out and put it
Well,
on
have fun.
TikTok.
Have fun, Ryan.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, hey, and I just want to say thank you for your time. And before we jump off here, we've got to circle back to the question.
Okay.
Is Roger Davis, I almost giggling now because of what you said earlier. Is Roger Davis I can't wait to hear this, a cat guy or a dog guy? Let's go.
Well, first of all, when we got married, I joked with my wife and I said, okay, we are going to have to sign a prenup. And in our prenup, no minivans, no cats.
It's,
So
man,
literally, I was like, no, neither of those two things. We did not sign a prenup, but we don't have a minivan. We've never had a minivan. For those of you that
hey,
love them,
man,
that's awesome. That's
that's,
great.
oh,
But no
man.
minivans, no cats. Now, if we're talking about like, let's go to Africa and see like big cats, let's go
Yeah,
to India. That's different. But I
that's
have two
right.
dogs in my house. I have two labs. General and
Yes.
Manning are my two labs, Chocolate and Yellow Lab, and so we are definitely dog people.
I love it. I love it, man. I just want to let you know, it's total side note right now, your credibility with my wife Heather just shot through the roof with the no minivan and no cat.
No. It's fine for other
So,
people,
yeah,
Ryan.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
fine
yeah.
for other people.
It's
Just
a
like other
preference.
things
It's a
in life. It's
preference.
just not my preference.
That's right, man. She said, Ryan, you can get me any car you want to, but if you bring home a minivan, you're driving it.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
You got to have more than a 6-inch clearance.
yeah, that's right, man. That's right. Well, Roger, thanks again for your time. Thank you for your ministry, what you do. I can't wait for this summer, us being together and all God's doing. If you're looking for a camp for students, go check out ym360.com or generatestudents.com. You'll find it all there. And I promise you, you won't regret being part of it. And thank you for listening to this podcast. And as always, it helps us out when you like, when you leave a comment, and when you share it out to others. So if you do that, we'd be incredibly grateful because it is our goal to see 1 million teens trained to share the gospel around the globe by 2030 because we know we are not to be, as Roger said, just getters of the gospel. We are to be givers of the gospel. So today's a great day to tell someone about Jesus. Get out of here and let's make it happen.